actually reviewed this game on this channel in 2017. I was sort of getting my feet wet trying out YouTube as a platform, and I didn't really have any idea what I was doing. But the reason I chose this game for that early review was simple. I was playing Breath of the Wild, and every time I played it, I had this lingering thought in the back of my head. I was thinking about A Link to the Past. Now, that may seem strange, and I'm not sure myself what the frame of reference of my mind was at the time. Some might say that Breath of the Wild was the first game to break from the established formula A Link to the Past set up. And I would agree with that sentiment. While not as legendary as Ocarina of Time, A Link to the Past is far more influential than even that game in setting up what a Zelda game would be. It pioneered the Zelda Formula that Ocarina of Time popularized. As a pioneer in the adventure genre, many games have tried to imitate it over the years, but none can displace it. This is A Link to the Past. This is the Zelda experience. Released in 1991 in Japan and the following year in North America, you play as Link, who awakens in the night when a voice calls for his aid in a dream. The rain beats heavy on the roof as Link's uncle leaves, braving the storm and telling his nephew not to follow him. The first thing you might notice looking back on this game is that there is no tutorial, or at least not a traditional one. Link gets up and you are in full control. In the room are several objects. A chest, with the first item in the game, a lantern. The lantern is attached to a button prompt on the screen, but can only be used if Link has magic in his meter. In addition to the chest and lantern, there are 3 pots in the upper right corner. Link can pick up and throw these, which all contain hearts. They always contain hearts, and every time you start the game here, you can refill your hearts reliably with these pots. This one room teaches, without tutorials, major mechanics Link will need to progress. Opening chests, picking up and throwing items, and equipable items, some of which are resource dependent. Stepping outside, the dull rain sound hitting the roof of Link's house turns into a torrent, and the music is tense, and you can feel the urgency in the air. Is Link's uncle okay? Where is Zelda? All paths are closed to you save one, going north. The game funnels you through several dead ends to a grove on the right side of the castle, which has a bush surrounded by stone. You have seen a lot of these bushes, and you've likely found out by trial and error that you can lift them. Experiment enough, and you'll find yourself dropped into the castle basement. As an aside, having recently played Super Metroid, I compared that game's opening area to this game's. In Super Metroid, the closed-off areas are gated by the necessity for certain upgrades, off to the left and to right. One is completely inaccessible as Samus is too large, but a second to the left further down can be opened using her beam. Once inside, though, progression is blocked by another space that's too small. A red door across on the right is unopenable with Samus's beam, and Samus can only progress through the door at the bottom of the shaft. In the colony, that will be true later in this game, but for now, in the opening area, most of the roadblocks are simply that, roadblocks. Things that you cannot overcome even through sequence breaking or things like that. Unless you can glitch the game somehow, which most of us can't do, and is not necessarily developer intended. And I would argue that some of Super Metroid's skips are developer intended. Link's uncle has fallen in battle. With his dying breath, he gives Link his sword and tasks him to save the princess. He then tells Link how to wield the technique special to their family's lineage, the single axle, and then he's gone. The only one left to save Hyrule is you. Soon after that, the training wheels come pretty much completely off. You leave the passage. For the first time, you're in a space with multiple paths forward. It's good to explore, find treasure, fight different enemies, discover some interesting NPCs, and get comfortable with the combat. The sword is always equipped on a dedicated button. There are 3 sword attacks in the beginning. A swing that takes a certain finesse when battling enemies with shields like the soldiers in the castle, so you can get lots of practice. A jab, which is available when you charge the spin attack, and the spin attack itself. Each of these is situationally useful. Skeleton enemies from later in the game will jump and dodge swings, but are easily dispatched with the stabs or the spin attack. The spin attack takes time to charge, but it's great for clearing out multiple enemies at once or cutting down bushes. The swing is very fast and has a wide forward arc, which means it hits more objects than are directly in front of the player. It hits some off to the side as well. So it has some versatility. It looks good in motion on screen. Eventually, Link will progress and he will pick up his first additional secondary item, the boomerang. Capable of killing small enemies and stunning larger ones, it is helpful in handling the first boss in the nearby room guarding Zelda. But that said, it's not the only way to deal with the guard boss. You can pick up pots and chunk them at him until he dies, or you can sneak in with a sword and poke him to death, dodging in and out of his attacks. This shows the player that there is often more than one way to approach any given situation, and as your arsenal improves, you may be rewarded by thinking outside the box. Picking up Zelda, she will guide you to the throne room, where the 2 of you will escape through the castle. Game over, mission accomplished, roll credits. Okay, not quite. Link now has a new objective. Get the Master Sword and defeat the Dark Priest Aghanim. Aghanim, after killing the king and brainwashing the guards of the castle, now controls Hyrule, and Link will need the Blade of Evil's Bane to cut down the fiend and save Hyrule from the release of Ganon. Stepping out of the church, the world opens up even more. In this game, Link's circle of influence grows as he does. As you become more powerful, the world expands similar to the aforementioned Super Metroid. The top-down perspective takes the emphasis away from platforming, breaking the convention that was held in Zelda 2, but returns to Zelda's roots. However, Zelda 2's progression, which is tied to interacting with NPCs, remains as a key mechanic. So interacting with these NPCs leads to your first stop, Kakariko Village. He needs to find and talk to the elder named Sahasrara. I think that's how you say it? I don't know. The evil priest is also searching for him, so we need to find someone in the town who can tell us where he is. His grandson is in the lower left corner, and it's the farthest space in the village away from where you enter. This means that to find him, you'll likely systematically search every nook and cranny of the village. This will net you some sweet rewards, including bombs, bottles, and the bug net, which is the most powerful item in the game. In all seriousness, the game is still cleverly designed to teach you how you will interact with and explore the world, continuing to scale up this adventure. The grandson tells you that the old man is in the ruins near the palace to the east, on the other side of the map from your current location. Crossing the map and fighting guards and monsters, you find the old man who challenges you to return with proof of your worth before he tells you more, and you enter the first real dungeon of the game. If I were to ask you which Zelda game has the most dungeons, what would you guess, just off the top of your head, without Googling it? Twilight Princess? Wind Waker? Ocarina of Time? All those answers are wrong. A Link to the Past has 12 dungeons. 12! Its successor on the 3DS, A Link Between Worlds, is the only game that matches it. Dungeons are arranged into floors, and there's a surprising amount of three-dimensional thinking involved in this 2D game. In the room with the bow, there are 2 pots that you can jump down into that have fairies. Some dungeons use this jumping between floors as a central mechanic, but almost every room and every dungeon has 2 levels. Eventually, you'll get to the big key and receive the bow from the large chest. You've been picking up arrows ever since you entered this dungeon, so you likely figured it was coming. There are some enemies here that can only be killed with the bow, and the boss is designed around teaching Link to use the bow to dispatch enemies. The Armos Knights jump around in tight patterns that the player can utilize to make quick work of them. Considering most players will only have 4 hearts here, it's not a major test of strength. Link proves his worth and goes to show Sahasrara. The old man explains that to find the Master Sword, 2 more pendants are needed, and he marks your map with their locations. The mountain path is blocked by a large boulder, and in the temple in the desert, it will not open for you. A statue with unreadable text is your only clue, so once again, the player is left to their own devices to figure out how to progress. Fortunately, Sahasrara does not leave you empty-handed. The Pegasus boots are your first movement upgrade. They allow Link to cross screens quickly. Fortune tellers can be consulted for clues to keep players from getting stuck. But I've never actually used one because if you talk to enough NPCs, they will clearly tell you what you should be doing. Zora's flippers, the ice rod, water portals, and upgrades for the boomerang are all available if you know where to look or listen to the clues people have been giving you. To get past the stone written in gibberish, you need a book to translate it. Where do you find books? In a library, of course. You may have already seen the book in the library if you were diligent in looking through every building at Kakariko. You were diligent, right? You did keep going down even though it's a dead end, right? You can use the boots you got to access the book by ramming headfirst into the bookshelf. From here you can enter the second dungeon. And someone needs to vacuum this place. The bugs are crawling right out of the sand coming after me. Here you pick up the gauntlets that make a man out of you and fight the Landmolas. I cannot make up these names. Which throw dirt at you and jump around a lot. It's not too hard, and you now have the second pendant and a few more options for unlocking stuff on the overworld. This is the game loop. Items, dungeons, item, overworld, items, dungeon. After you have made the loop, picking up your upgrades, you need to climb Death Mountain. You can now pick up and throw this rock out of your way, and once inside the cave, you meet another mysterious old man. What is this old man doing living in the middle of nowhere? Like, hey man, where do you shop? The closest store is a hot minute from here, and to get there you gotta go through this dark, dank cave with a bunch of bats and dodge falling boulders. I'm just not sure that you've picked a great place to live. The weird old man gives you a mirror that is in no way a creepy thing to give someone. Link takes the mirror and goes to the top of the mountain to see what seems like a dead end. You may start throwing rocks in frustration before you find a weird portal. Stepping into it, you are transported to the Dark World. But that's not the craziest part. It turns out now Link is a bunny. Yeah, so without the Moon Pearl, stepping through to the Dark World changes you into a monster. Or a tree. There are a lot of people turning into trees. But lucky you, you have the mirror and you can bring yourself back to the Light World. However, the two worlds are slightly different, and you can use these differences to progress. Let's talk about the dual world mechanic before we move on. First off, it's a brilliant way of getting the most out of your world map and resources. A lot of the locations are simple pallet swaps, and loading between the two worlds is snappy. Performing specific tasks in one world can affect things in the other world. And there are few games, even in this franchise, that pull it off as effectively as A Link to the Past. You might disagree with that statement, but name one game you can think of where you can swap as quickly and as easily as this one. Climbing the tower, you get to another dungeon, and there is a strong verticality built into this one, even more so than the dungeons we've seen so far. You grab the Moon Pearl here, which allows you to remain human in the Dark World, which is helpful, because you can use a sword. Then it's boss time. This boss fully utilizes the verticality theme, because if you get knocked off of this small arena, you have to start all over again. Funny story, this is the first game I ever emulated way back in the day. Don't come at me, Nintendo, I was young. I had not played the game in years, and I downloaded a ROM to play on my laptop. I did not have a controller, so I tried playing it with the keyboard. And this was the boss that made me decide that I did not want to emulate games anymore. So after beating the hamburger boss, you come face to face with Ganon and save Princess Zelda, who has recently been re-kidnapped. Come on, man, you had one job. How hard is it to save a... Oh. Turns out it's harder to save the princess than I remember. I love how he does this fancy move, but in reality he just goes behind the curtain. It cracks me up. If you defeat Ganon, it's too late, and you are transported back to the Dark World. Good thing we got the Pearl. Now, the game has 7 more dungeons that you can tackle in different orders after the first one is out of the way. Enemies deal more damage in this environment, but you can get more and more items that will help you dispatch them or deal with the damage. I could go into the details about all of them, but I just want to mention some highlights from the journey, because 7 dungeons is a lot to go over, and honestly I feel like I'd start repeating myself after a while, so let's just hit some highlights. First, this game absolutely nails environmental storytelling. Super Metroid usually gets a lot of credit in this department, and rightfully so, but I feel like A Link to the Past shines just as bright and gets overlooked. For example, this is the desert in the Light World, and in the Dark World it's a swamp. Simple, right? But the Dark World is made based on the heart of the one who touches the Triforce. It's not actually a dark world, it's just dark because Ganon touched it. There is this scene in Wind Waker where Ganondorf, on top of the tower in the end of the game, remarks that his home in the desert was a place of death. His heart's desire for his forgotten homeland? A place of perpetual rain and life. I know that Wind Waker's Ganondorf line was written many years after this game, but it feels naturally connected in a way. The best visual storytelling moment in the game, for me, that I know was done on purpose, is the Thief's Dungeon. You have to unlock all these gates and navigate traps and monsters only to find this little girl. Why so much security to keep Link out? Or is it to hold something in? What about this dungeon? You need to drain the lake in the real world to access the dungeon in the Dark World. There are lots of tiny little details that are all over the map, and some of them are storytelling related, and some of them are just there for flavor or for puzzles. It's great. I really like it. Then there is the best side quest in the game. It has the best reward in the game. It starts with the grandfather mourning his missing grandson in the tavern in the Light World. You get to meet this NPC very early in the game. When you go to the forest he describes, there's a little ghost or phantom there playing the ocarina with all the animals around. Going to the same spot in the Dark World, you find this boy slowly turning into a tree. Seriously, what is it about Japan and people turning into trees? He gives you a shovel and tells you where to find his ocarina in the Light World. Once you get it and come back, he succumbs to the effects of the treeification. I'm not sure if that's a word. And you take the ocarina back to the old man, and he tells you to play it in the center of town under the bird statue. And doing this reveals a duck! This incredible duck can fly you to several positions on the Light World map, and he is the best boy and the most awesome thing in this game. But again, I'm a bit partial to ducks. Seriously though, fast travel in a Super Nintendo game, that's quite an innovation in an action game. I mean, I love Super Metroid, but how much more super would it be with a duck? The early game is great, but when the Dark World opens up, it becomes incredible. The bosses get better, the dungeons get better, and you get more and more items to play with. Let's talk about some of my favorites from dungeons and items. If I had to pick a favorite dungeon, it would definitely be the Thief's Dungeon. I love the storytelling in that one. Some clever puzzles, and you get the Titan mitts, while not earth-shattering. Okay, maybe earth-shattering, but not mind-blowing, are very useful to progression. Favorite boss? I really like the Helmasaur King. Hitting that helmet with the hammer while avoiding his tail, and it's a colossal size, is challenging and it's fun. I'm a sucker for any dungeon that introduces an item that not only allows you to fight the boss in a unique way, but also is essential for progression. In addition to the boss being my favorite, I think the hammer is also my favorite item as well. It just does what a good Zelda item should do. It offers variety of combat, it unlocks secrets and pathways that lead to unique interactions with certain enemies, and is essential to progression. Honorable mention goes to the medallions, though. They are broken when you pick up the half magic upgrade. You can like walk into any room in a dungeon and just one-shot everything in one go. And, you know, when you got a lot of magic, you can just go through a place very quickly. Let's talk about the music. Soundtrack is iconic, and there's a reason that it pretty much exists in some form in every Zelda game that follows. Sound effects are good as well. I especially like Link's little fall scream. I'm not the biggest fan of the "your health is low" beep, "please heal soon" noise, but I also have more than once died in spite of having the healing items because I turned the volume on the TV down and did not realize I was low on health. Sound design, am I right? I think in my original video I critiqued Link's sprite as being less detailed than a lot of the NPCs, and playing this hacked version with upgraded visuals is easy to still think along those lines. I need to remind myself that while this game could have potentially looked better, that would not have made it a better game. In fact, I think I know why they went in this direction. After playing other adventure games like Zelda, the chief criticism that I usually have is the hitboxes being too big. And I think in a world on this scale on a 4x3 television screen, Link being small is vital to keep the player from feeling like a pinball in an obstacle course. In other words, Link's size in retrospect, I feel is like a small compromise, as it helps make the world seem bigger and helps the player to weave around obstacles of the world more effectively. Speaking of versions played, this version also added the use of the shoulder buttons to cycle through weapons and items, which I did not realize for most of the playthrough. This is actually a feature in my original short review that I said I wish that they had implemented, but now that it's here, I don't find it to be all that useful or convenient. The problem is that there's just a lot of usable items, and if you want an item quickly, it's pretty far down the list. It takes longer to use the shoulder buttons to get there than just opening the menu and picking it. I think if this feature had been in the original game, I wouldn't have used it any more then as I did in this playthrough, and I used it very sparingly. Shows what I know about game design. That's most of what I wanted to say mechanically about this game, so let's wrap this review up. After beating Turtle Rock, which is probably the most challenging dungeon in the game simply because of the moving platform section and the need for so much magic to complete the dungeon and then beat the boss, Princess Zelda is rescued again, and Link can ascend Ganon's Tower. Ganon's Tower is sort of the greatest hits dungeon, with rooms and sections serving as miniature versions of the other dungeon's puzzles. It's an amazing place, but it's not as difficult as Turtle Rock. But at this stage in the game, you're fully kitted out, so that makes it much easier, especially if you already used the big bomb to blow up this wall on the pyramid. Inside is a fairy that can give you the silver arrows and the golden sword. The silver arrows can kill almost anything in one shot, and the golden sword is the most powerful upgraded sword in the game. In the tower, you face 3 bosses from the first dungeons again, and they all go down pretty easily if you can hit them with the silver arrows, except with the sandwich centipede, but that might be because I suck. Aghanim is waiting at the top for another round of tennis, and he has brought some extra players. But he goes down pretty easily, especially if you can use those extra players against him. Ganon flees in a bat form and opens the path in the pyramid for the final showdown. Get back here and face me and my duck! This is mechanically the best boss fight in the game and offers a decent challenge. It has multiple phases, and each phase has different stage elements to interact with. After Ganon is defeated, Link encounters the Triforce. The Triforce seems to be alive and speaks to Link. Its essence explains the power of the Triforce to express the wish of its wielder. That expression is related to the wish and the wisher. This implies that Ganon's wish was weak since it was not wholly granted. He didn't conquer all of Hyrule, just the Dark World, and then had to build his own power to conquer the Light World. Link touches the Triforce, and the end shows the effect of his wish. The king and Link's uncle are both alive, and the world is once again at peace. The tagline says that the Master Sword sleeps in the forest forever, until the next 7 or so games in the timeline. And that is A Link to the Past. It's fantastic. I really cannot think of anything mechanically I would change, especially after replaying this hacked ROM. Maybe some dungeon mechanics here and there. I do not like this maze in Turtle Rock, but for the most part, it does not feel old when I'm playing it. I do not think it needs a remaster or an update. If they did attempt it, I would like it to be more of this HD 2D style that we've been seeing lately instead of something like Link's Awakening Remake. But what I really think I'd prefer is something more like a 2D Zelda All-Stars collection. 1 and 2 with 16-bit style upgrades and some modern amenities packaged with all the other 2D Zelda games on a Switch cart, including both 4 swords. I know Joy-Cons don't have screens, but leave the main game in 4:3 aspect ratio, and then whenever characters go into caves, have their screens pop up in the corners. It will never happen, but hey, I can dream. I absolutely would recommend this game to anyone, whether you're a Zelda fan or not. And if you haven't played it, you really need to. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review, and if you are not already a subscriber to the channel, then I would implore you to subscribe. Like the video, share it on your socials if you feel so inclined. I do have a Patreon. There are links on my channel to that said Patreon if you'd like to support this channel and see more content like this in the future. There is a full playthrough of this game over on my second channel, Preacher Plays. I encourage you to go and watch that playthrough if you enjoyed this review. And there are many other Metroid adventure-style games on that channel as well to watch. I have a full review of Super Metroid on the main channel here, if you'd like to watch that video. And in the future, I'm probably going to do some sort of Super Metroid, A Link to the Past comparison video. I know that's kind of apples and oranges, but it's also, they're both kind of titans of the adventure genre, and I think I'd like to tackle that. So once again, thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.